They weren't on posters, and they weren't the showroom stars. These V8s were hidden assassins, stuffed into family cars, luxury cruisers, and ordinary coupes. Engines Detroit built in secret, then tried to bury before the world caught on. But once unleashed, they proved too powerful to stay forgotten.
Our next
Top 1, 1970 Ford Torino Cobra 429 Super Cobra Jet Drag Pack. They called it a mid-size family car, but hidden under its long, flat hood was a weapon built not for groceries, but for war. The 1970 Ford Torino Cobra with the 429 Super Cobra Jet Drag Pack wasn't just another muscle car, it was Detroit's back-alley attempt to sneak a Shelby killer into the streets. The Torino Cobra looked almost polite on the outside. A fastback roofline, subtle Cobra badging, and a functional shaker hood gave hints, but to most buyers, it seemed like just another big Ford. Inside, the cabin was typical 1970 Ford Fairbench or bucket seats, vinyl trim, wood grain dash, and AM radio. It didn't scream exotic, but this plain wrapper was deliberate camouflage. What mattered was the drag pack option. Tick the right box and suddenly your Torino Cobra came alive. The heart was the 429 cubic inch Super Cobra Jet V8, factory rated at 375 horsepower, but known to push well beyond 400. The drag pack added a 3.91 or 4.3 traction lock rear axle, oil cooler, forged pistons, and heavy-duty rods. A close ratio 4-speed or C6 automatic completed the setup. With weight around 3,800 pounds, this was a true sledgehammer in disguise. On paper, the SCJ was already impressive. On asphalt, it shocked even seasoned drag racers. Quarter-mile times in the low 13th S at over 105 miles per hour meant it could humble Corvettes, Mopars, even big-block Chevelles. For a family Ford, that was terrifying. Production was extremely limited. Fewer than 500 Torino Cobras were ever built, with the SCJ drag pack in 1970 making survivors unicorns today. Because of its rarity and understated looks, the Torino SCJ never achieved the fame of Boss Mustangs or Hemi Mopars. Many sat unloved in used car lots through the mid-70s, victims of insurance premiums and the gas crisis. Yet those who knew what lurked beneath respected it as one of the rawest factory street machines Detroit ever dared to slip past regulators. Today, collectors treat it as a secret handshake, values soaring past 6 figures when one surfaces. But Ford wasn't the only one hiding weapons under plain sheet metal. Just 1 year earlier, Chevrolet had slipped its own street assassin into the mix, and this one looked like a taxi but ran like a time bomb. Top 2. 1969 Chevrolet Biscayne 427 L72. It looked like a cab driver's car, plain steel wheels, no chrome, no frills. But under that sleepy blue-collar skin lurked one of the most violent factory engines Chevrolet ever built. The 1969 Biscayne with the 427 L72 was a wolf dressed as a janitor, and only insiders knew the danger. Chevrolet's Biscayne was the cheapest, most stripped-down full-size car in the lineup. No fancy Impala trim, no Caprice luxury, just flat bench seats, rubber floor mats, and the bare minimum of comfort. Most Biscaynes went to fleets, taxis, and budget-minded families. That made it the perfect camouflage for Chevrolet's most dangerous street experiment. Order the L72 427 cubic inch V8, and suddenly this plain sedan became a missile. The big block was rated at 425 horsepower, though enthusiasts agree the number was deliberately underrated. Real output was closer to 450. Mated to a 4-speed Muncie and a 4.1 posit traction rear axle, the Biscayne weighed nearly 300 pounds less than an Impala. Stripped of luxury, it became a bare-knuckle fighter. Here's the twist. Chevrolet only built about 1,200 Biscaynes with the L72 in 1969. Most buyers were savvy racers who knew what the car could do. On the drag strip, it was an assassin. Quarter miles in the low 13S, sometimes even high 12S with slicks, meant it could take down Roadrunners, Boss Mustangs, and even Mopar Hemis, all while looking like your uncle's grocery getter. The Biscayne L72 became the definition of a sleeper. Its cheap exterior fooled cops, rivals, and insurance adjusters alike, yet its rarity doomed it to obscurity. By the mid-70s, most were wrecked at the strip or scrapped when gas prices and insurance rates destroyed the muscle car market. Today, surviving examples are prized for their ghost-like presence in muscle history, often bringing $150,000 or more at auction. If Chevrolet's sleeper looked like a taxi, Buick's secret weapon looked like a banker's car. The 1970 Buick GS Stage 1 455 wore chrome trim and plush interiors, but its iron fist came from Detroit's highest torque muscle engine, XX. Top 3. 1970 Buick GS Stage 1 455. Buick was supposed to be the gentleman's brand, a step below Cadillac, more golf course than drag strip. But in 1970, Buick unleashed something that made even the rowdiest street racers pause. The GS Stage 1 455 wasn't just powerful, it was a refined brute that embarrassed nearly every other Detroit V8. The GS Stage 1 looked tame compared to Mopar wing cars or Chevrolet's flamboyant SS Chevelles. Wide chrome bumpers, discreet Stage 1 badges, and a plush interior with wood-grain trim gave it the image of a banker's coupe. Bucket seats, full instrumentation, and comfort options made it feel more Riviera than Roadrunner. But the beauty of the GS was in the deception. Didn't need flash when it had torque. Under the hood sat the 455 cubic inch big block, tuned with high-flow heads, larger valves, and a more aggressive camshaft. Officially rated at 360 horsepower, insiders knew Buick was downplaying numbers to dodge insurance penalties. Dyno tests revealed real output closer to 420 horsepower, with a staggering 510 pound-feet of torque, the highest torque figure of any muscle car engine of the era. That torque meant brutal launches. Period tests showed the Stage 1 GS running the quarter mile in 13.3 seconds at 105 miles per hour, numbers that shocked the muscle world. Car and driver even clocked a Stage 1 beating a Hemi Cuda in a heads-up test. For a car that looked like it belonged in a country club parking lot, this was Detroit's most dangerous understatement. Production numbers were fairly low, around 2,465 Gs. Stage 1 hardtops were built in 1970, along with a handful of convertibles. Most buyers were older enthusiasts who wanted speed without sacrificing comfort. This buyer profile meant many Stage 1s survived longer than flashier muscle cars, but their subtle looks kept them under the radar for decades. The GS Stage 1 has since become one of the most respected sleepers of the muscle era. Collectors prize its blend of refinement and raw power, and today, pristine examples can command $150,000 to $200,000 at auction. More importantly, it cemented Buick's brief moment as a performance heavyweight, showing that luxury and savagery could coexist in one machine. If Buick's disguise was luxury, Oldsmobile's trick was subtlety. The 1969 Cutlass W31 looked like a modest intermediate, but under its hood was a screaming small-block V8 built to out-rev anything in its class. Top 4. 1969 Oldsmobile Cutlass W31. At first glance, the 1969 Oldsmobile Cutlass W31 looked like the car your neighbor's dad drove to work. Clean, ordinary, almost conservative. But under that modest skin, Oldsmobile hid a small-block screamer designed to embarrass bigger, heavier V8s. This was Detroit's most unlikely weapon in disguise. Unlike flashy Hemis or big 454 Chevys, the W31 didn't rely on brute displacement. The package was built around the 350 cubic inch Rocket V8. But this wasn't the mild, grocery-getter motor most Cutlasses carried. Engineers fitted it with high compression pistons, a hot camshaft, better flowing heads, and a quadrajet carburetor tuned for maximum response. Output was officially 325 horsepower, but what made the W31 special wasn't just horsepower, it was how it delivered it. Weighing less than big block competitors, the W31's engine loved to rev, pulling strong all the way to 6,000 RPM. To back it up, Oldsmobile offered mandatory 4.33 gears, heavy-duty suspension, and a choice of a close-ratio Muncie 4-speed or Turbo 400 automatic. Inside, it was still a Cutlass bucket seats, rally gauges, and the kind of trim that made it feel more upscale than a base Chevelle or Roadrunner. It looked polite, but it was built for drag strip cruelty. Here's the kicker. While everyone was chasing cubic inches, the W31 proved that a small block could punch far above its weight. In stock form, the W31 could run low 14-second quarter miles at over 100 miles per hour, numbers that shocked racers who expected little from a mere 350. On the street, the deep gears and screaming RPMs made it a stoplight assassin. But rarity added to its legend. Only about 913 W31s were built in 1969, spread across both Cutlass Sport Coupes and F85 models. That scarcity meant the W31 never got the same spotlight as big block GTOs or 442s, but to those who knew, it was the ultimate sleeper X. Today, the W31 is prized as one of the most underrated muscle cars of the era. Its combination of rarity, factory drag strip gearing, and small block efficiency makes it a unicorn in the Oldsmobile lineup. At auction, survivors can fetch well over $70,000, with restored examples climbing higher as collectors finally recognize the car's hidden brilliance. If Oldsmobile proved small blocks could run with the giants, Pontiac took another path, stuffing massive torque into an economy-minded shell. The 1971 Pontiac T37 455 HO looked humble, but what it carried underhood turned it into a budget GTO with a vicious streak. Top 5, 1971, Pontiac T37 455 HO. In 1971, Pontiac unveiled a car nobody saw coming. The T37 looked like a budget Tempest, stripped of glamour and chrome, marketed as a low-cost alternative. Yet beneath its plain exterior lurked a monster. Detroit's last great sleight of hand, a factory time bomb disguised as an economy coupe. The T37 was meant to attract young buyers who couldn't afford a GTO. The body was bare bones, minimal trim, bench seats standard, even rubber floor mats replacing carpet. At first glance, it screamed thrift over thrill, but Pontiac engineers left a door wide open. You could order nearly any engine from the corporate menu. And that's where things turned sinister. Hidden in the order sheets was the 455 HO, a high-compression brute fitted with ram air induction, aluminum intake, free-flowing heads, and a 4-barrel carb. Suddenly, the budget coupe transformed into a fire-breathing predator. Only a handful of buyers discovered the trick. Production numbers are debated, but estimates suggest fewer than 1,200 T37s received the 455 HO package. Most buyers settled for 6 cylinders or small V8s, never realizing they could have ordered a wolf in sheep's clothing. With 335 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, this economy car could rip down the quarter mile in the low 13s quicker than many GTOs. What Pontiac created was more than a bargain muscle car, was a hidden assassin. Insurance companies overlooked it, racers exploited it, and collectors today whisper about it as one of Pontiac's cleverest backdoor moves. A lightweight body plus a heavyweight engine meant devastating acceleration. While rivals flaunted flashy graphics, the T37 stayed silent, striking only when provoked. The 455 HO T37 remains one of Detroit's greatest bait-and-swip builds, forgettable on the outside, ferocious within. And just when Pontiac seemed done playing tricks, another GM division was preparing a luxury-bodied shocker hiding muscle under Monte Carlo elegance. Top 6, 1971 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS4 54 LS5. Chevrolet called it a personal luxury coupe, but under the skin, the Monte Carlo SS hid something far more sinister. Cloaked in vinyl roofs, opera windows, and chrome trim, this boulevard cruiser carried a weapon Detroit never meant to flaunt, the massive 454 LS5 Big Block, one of the last muscle engines smuggled into a luxury wrapper. The Monte Carlo debuted in 1970 to chase the booming personal luxury market, competing with the Pontiac Grand Prix and Ford Thunderbird. Buyers expected long hoods, plush interiors, and smooth rides. For 1971, Chevrolet added an SS package that looked tame edges, heavy-duty suspension, and little else. But tick the right box, and you got the 454 L5 V8, a monster rated at 365 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. Inside, comfort was the name of the game. Strato bucket seats, wood grain accents, air conditioning, and even an 8-track player. From the driver's seat, you could forget you were piloting a quarter-mile threat. The twist? Only about 1,919 Monte Carlo SS 454s were built in 1971, making it one of the rarest hidden performance Chevys of its era. Most people dismissed it as a plush cruiser, but with its big block fury it could storm the quarter mile in 14.5 seconds at nearly 98 miles per hour, numbers that embarrassed plenty of lighter muscle cars. The luxury image let it slip under insurance radar, protecting it from the crackdowns choking performance elsewhere. What you had was a contradiction, a luxury car that could brawl at stoplights. The Monte Carlo SS 454 LS5 proved that Detroit's muscle wasn't always loud and obvious. It was a message from Chevrolet that performance could wear a tailored suit and still throw punches. Today, collectors hunt these cars because they symbolize the last gasp of muscle disguised in elegance. A wolf dressed in silk, waiting to pounce. But if the Monte Carlo was a velvet hammer, Detroit had even stranger tricks up its sleeve. Across town, Mercury dressed up a full-size cruiser with hidden aggression, a brute hiding behind formal lines and quiet dignity. Top 7, 1969 Mercury Marauder X100 429. At first glance, the 1969 Mercury Marauder X100 looked like a gentleman's express, low, wide, and dressed in restraint. Yet lurking beneath its formal lines and hidden headlamps was an engine that Detroit quietly tried to bury. The 429 cubic inch V8 made this forgotten fastback a secret weapon disguised as a Sunday cruiser. Mercury built the Marauder X100 to inject excitement into its lineup, slotting it above the Monterey and beneath the Lincoln Continental. The styling was sleek but conservative, a long hood, fastback roofline, and subtle trim designed to appeal to buyers seeking status, not speed. Inside, it was pure comfort. Deeply padded bucket seats, wood grain appliques, and optional power everything. Few muscle cues were visible. It seemed more suited to country club parking lots than drag strips. Yet under the hood lay the real story. The Marauder X100 came standard with the 429 Thunderjet V8, but buyers with sharper instincts could opt for the hotter 429 Super Cobra jet, pumping out 375 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque, hooked to a C6 automatic and 3.25 rear gears. This 4,300-pound full-size coupe could still thunder down the quarter-mile in the low 15 startling for a car its size. Here's the catch. Despite its brute force, only about 5,635 X100S rolled off the line in 1969. The combination of high price, heavy body, and Mercury's quiet marketing kept it invisible to most muscle enthusiasts. Insurance companies barely noticed it, allowing owners to fly under the radar while wielding big block power usually reserved for Mustangs, Torinos, or Cougars. The Marauder's muscle was effectively buried in plain sight. That made the X100 a contradiction luxury. Car buyers never unleashed its true potential, while muscle car fans rarely knew it existed. Today, survivors are rare gems, valued as much for their hidden identity as their horsepower. The Marauder X100 represents Detroit's odd attempt to slip unfiltered muscle into a package meant for quiet prestige. It was, in every way, a factory sleeper that time forgot. But Mercury wasn't the only one guilty of dressing brute force in a tuxedo. Just a few years later, Pontiac would unleash a car cloaked in white paint and spoilers that carried the same buried in 10-tone last gasp of muscle before the curtain fell. Top 8, 1977 Pontiac Can Am. On the surface, the 1977 Pontiac Can Am looked like just another colonnade coupe. White paint, shaker scoop, some stripes. But beneath that subtle exterior, Detroit buried a V8 secret meant to challenge everything in its class. It wasn't a GTO revival. It was something stranger and more short-lived. The Can Am was born from Pontiac's need to recapture its muscle image in a world tightening under emissions rules. Based on the Le Mans, it wore a bold ducktail spoiler, blackout grille, and the same shaker hood scoop lifted straight from the Trans Am. Inside, it leaned toward comfort, rally gauges, sport steering wheel, and optional swivel bucket seats. To most buyers, it seemed like Pontiac's last desperate styling exercise, but looks were deceptive. Under that shaker scoop sat the 400 cubic inch Pontiac V8, rated at 200 net horsepower, or the optional 455 cubic inch V8 for those lucky enough to grab one before supply dried up. Backed by a turbo 400 automatic, it hustled the 3,800-pound coupe through the quarter mile in the mid-15 seconds that fostered the most mid-size rivals of 1977. Pontiac claimed it was a true return to form, but reality would prove otherwise. Pontiac planned to build around 5,000 units, but disaster struck. The special rear spoiler mold broke early in production, halting assembly. By the time they patched the problem, Pontiac's patience and budget had evaporated. Only about 1,377 Can Ams were produced before the axe fell, making it one of the rarest Pontiac muscle offerings of the decade. What could have been a mass matter revival was instead quietly buried by circumstance. For Pontiac fans, the Can Am became an instant curiosity. Too rare to build a reputation, too brief to revive the GTO's glory, it slipped into obscurity. Collectors now hunt them as factory oddities, cars that wore Trans Am hardware on a family car frame. The buried V8 still growls, but only in a few garages worldwide. The Pontiac Can Am closes its story not as a savior, but as a fleeting ghost of what might have been. A rare flash of buried power that proved even Detroit's boldest experiments could vanish overnight. These 8 hidden V8 ests remind us that Detroit's story was never straightforward. Powerplants meant to dominate were tucked away in unlikely bodies, quietly unleashed, then buried by corporate caution, production issues, or government pressure. Today, they survive as rare whispers of a time when engineers smuggled rebellion into steel. Which of these buried beasts surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear your take. And if you're hungry for more forgotten legends, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Muscle Cars Revolution will keep unearthing Detroit's best-kept secrets.